It's been a busy couple of days. Today, the FOMC handed us a 50 basis point cut. Yesterday, we got our hands on the midnight Nightpaper, and Cardano self governance by the people, for the people is now in full swing. If you're way more concerned about what Midnight's going to do for Cardano than you are about Kamala's latest word salad or what Donald thinks is on the menu in Ohio, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool and the Army of Spies DRep address listed in the description box below, ticker AOS. First off, I want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address. I believe we have 187 delegators right now for a total live stake of over 10.5 million, which is way more and way quicker than I ever expected. So thank you so much. I am truly deeply grateful for this delegation. I know a lot of people haven't been able to delegate. A bunch of people have hit me up saying they're using the Daedalus wallet and they haven't been able to delegate yet. This makes perfect sense because this channel goes back to a time in the history of Cardano around when we basically had one full node wallet, and that was Daedalus. And we were starting to get some light wallets, but a lot of people who go back to the early days of this channel use Daedalus. And unfortunately, there is no governance functionality, at least not that I know of. And a bunch of you have hit me up saying you can't figure out how to delegate with Daedalus. I don't know either. I haven't talked to anybody who knows if there will be governance functionality for Daedalus. So no worries. If you're using Daedalus, you can't figure out how to delegate, you are not alone. There's a lot of people in the same boat. I know a lot of other people are not using Daedalus and they're having trouble figuring out how to delegate. So, if you fall into that second group, I have a video pinned to the top of my Twitter profile, my X profile. It's this video right here. It'll walk you through the steps of delegating if you're using Eternal. If you're using a different wallet other than Eternal, other than Daedalus, it's probably going to look something like this. But if you're having trouble delegating, feel free to hit me up. X, Twitter is probably the easiest place. Send me a message on X. Let me know you're having trouble, and I'll see if there's anything I can do to help out. If you want to know what the DRep address is for the AOS DRep account, it is this address right here in my Twitter profile, this one right here, and it's also in the description box below. Today was the release of the FOMC announcement. So, you know how this works. We get these announcements, and it's like, are they going to cut rates? Are they going to raise rates? And it has a huge impact on the entire economy, especially asset classes like crypto. This is a really important event for crypto. And you know my position on Jerome Powell, chairman of the Fed. I'm absolutely convinced at least one of his great grandparents was avian and definitely an owl of some type. My theory, you know my position on this. My theory is that one of his great grandparents, probably his great grandfather, one of his great grandfathers was out like hunting late at night or something, or going on a walk through the woods. And there was a lady owl, and things happened. And then a couple generations later, we have Jerome Powell, who is, I think, a good chair. He's a good Fed chair. But when I look at him, you can tell one of the great grandparents, definitely an owl of some type. It expresses, those genes express themselves in the eyebrows, specifically right here. You can see it. But what he had to say today was that we're getting a 50 basis point cut. So you saw everybody today on Twitter probably. And there's a little bit of an interesting thing, an interesting nuance of the timing. We'll talk about in a second. But you probably saw everybody on Twitter today saying we got a 50 BPS cut. People don't necessarily know what that means. What is BPS? They're talking about basis points. It's just a way to talk about hundredths of a percent cut. So 50 basis points is 0.50. So we're saying 50 hundredths of a percentage point cut. So 0.5%, 0.50%. So we got this 50 basis point cut today. And you probably know that a lot of people were expecting a 25 basis point cut. And then you had certain people on the left in Congress, the Dragon specifically, writing letters to Powell urging him to make a 75 basis point cut. So 0.75% cut to the rate. We got a 50 basis point cut, which surprised a lot of people. A lot of people were expecting a 0.25, 25 basis point cut. We got 50, and people, this is normally sort of a celebration event. If you're involved in these asset classes like equities or like crypto, a lot of people are going to celebrate a 50 basis point cut. It's like there was a lot of let's go today going on. A lot of people, thinking about popping bottles, thinking about what it's going to do to their asset prices. And there's a good reason for that. The history of crypto is certainly replete with examples that would indicate that the Fed balance sheet and crypto rallies have something to do with each other. So a lot of people are celebrating. If you want a contrarian take on this, you might check out um, Arthur Hayes' article, his perspective on this, which I believe was in a CoinDesk article. So he thinks the biggest sort of macro indicator right now is the dollar yen exchange rate. And he has kind of a nuanced, complicated argument, complicated thesis about how this 50 basis point cut might affect that dollar yen exchange rate. You can go read about that if you're really interested in macro. You might also be wondering how everybody knew this was going to be a 50 basis point cut even before Powell went on stage today. The reason everybody knows, and you probably already know this, but just for a few people who don't know this, the FOMC actually releases their statement in print form on their website a half an hour before Powell goes on stage today. So that's why everybody on Twitter already knew what it was before Powell even started talking today. But like I said, a lot of people thinking about popping bottles today. Other people have a more nuanced take. Here's that print version I was talking about, by the way. But what we know is that next year is sort of based on the history of crypto. Next year is supposed to be the fun time in crypto. This is the time we've all been waiting for. And the Fed has already sort of kicked things off with a 50 basis point cut. Obviously, this is the big news from yesterday in Cardano. And this is actually some of the biggest news in Cardano in a long time. And it's been coming for a long time. We've talked about midnight, the coming of midnight, how darkness would befall the land of Cardano. And it was going to be a great thing. The jury's still out on what kind of a thing it's going to be. I'm firmly in the it's a great thing camp because while all the marketing around midnight, at least lately, has been around it being a fourth gen blockchain and all of the privacy stuff and the zero knowledge proofs that we're going to talk about in a little bit. We'll talk about the ZK functionality of midnight in just a second. But I think all of that really buries the lead. Here's the real headline. This is the real headline. The real headline is that Midnight fixes one of the greatest triumphs of Cardano. I know that doesn't make sense, right? Let me explain. So, there is something in Cardano we've talked about many, many times, and it is the biggest triumph of Cardano and also Cardano's biggest cost, the Achilles heel of Cardano, the biggest, I don't want to call it a detriment. I don't want to call it a mistake, but it's definitely a cost. It's a trade off. That trade off is that we get a huge amount of security. We get a very secure ecosystem. The robbery forest so far has not been a big thing in Cardano. It's been wonderful. We're not living in the robbery forest in Cardano like they are over there in Ethereum. So we're a very secure ecosystem, but developer adoption is a huge cost. And the source of all that is, of course, Haskell. Haskell is a wonderful language. Those of you who have been watching this channel for a long time know that in the early days of Cardano and my involvement in Cardano, I think it goes back to 20, I can't remember what year, but early on in my involvement in Cardano, I got the big, gigantic textbook for Haskell. And I went through like 400 pages of it. And this is the complicated textbook that's like, I forget, like 1,200 pages long or something like that. And I went through like 400 pages, did all the homework, all the exercises, just so I could learn more about Haskell, so I could understand what's going on in Cardano a little bit better. And I'm glad I did that. However, when the textbook is that big and that dense, I can also understand why when we go to our friend ChatGPT here and we ask it, give me a list of the most popular programming languages, we get a list that does not include Haskell. Look at this. It goes out to spot number 14. R, Rust, Kotlin, Go, Ruby, Swift, PHP, C Sharp, C++, C, Java, Python, JavaScript. You probably already noticed I skipped one there for a good reason. It doesn't include Haskell. Haskell is not even on the list. Developers are not readily adopting Haskell. This has been known for a long time. This is not a surprise. Haskell is not a popular programming language because it's functional programming and you kind of have to understand, like the basics of lambda calculus, which is not hard. It's like the first chapter in the book and it's kind of fun to learn anyways, but developers don't want to learn Haskell. When we look at this list though, we do see some languages that developers do want to learn, that they are learning, they have learned. JavaScript, number one, 17 million users. Here's where Midnight comes in. The big headline about Midnight, the very first thing we talked about when it was revealed that Midnight was going to be a thing all those months ago. How long has it been now? I don't even know how many months it's been, but a long time. Has it been 12 months, 14, 11? I don't even know anymore. A long time ago, we talked about this. The big headline with Midnight is that it uses TypeScript. TypeScript. And you're like, what? I saw TypeScript as you scrolled through here. TypeScript was number 8, according to ChatGPT. You've probably heard people in Cardano citing a different rank for TypeScript. Here's the important thing, though. And it says it right down here. TypeScript is a superscript of JavaScript. And we see JavaScript number one, 17 million users. And so when we ask ChatGPT the important question, can a JavaScript developer, those 17 million JavaScript developers, according to ChatGPT, easily use TypeScript? ChatGPT says, yes, a JavaScript developer can relatively easily transition to TypeScript. Here are some key reasons why. Similar syntax, TypeScript is just a superset of JavaScript, meaning all of JavaScript code is valid TypeScript. A JavaScript developer can start writing TypeScript code incrementally without needing to learn a whole new syntax. They can add TypeScript features like types, interfaces, and classes as they become more comfortable. Optional typing. One of the biggest differences is the use of static types. TypeScript allows you to gradually introduce types, and typing is optional. This makes the transition smooth, familiar ecosystem, tooling support, incremental adoption. You are learning, slightly new language. So learning types, you're learning this additional stuff in the superset that is TypeScript. JavaScript developers will need to understand concepts like types, interfaces, and generics. Strictness, TypeScript introduces strict rules that help catch errors early but may feel restrictive at first. In summary, a JavaScript developer can adapt to TypeScript relatively quickly and benefit from the additional features without a steep learning curve. And one of the first things you're going to hear people say when you ask them about Haskell is that it has a steep learning curve. It's like the definition of steep learning curve in terms of programming languages. So over the last several years, before Midnight became a thing, my interaction with developers in relation to Cardano was basically me going around to every developer I know and asking them if they will learn Haskell so they can make things on Cardano, so they can build things on Cardano. And the answer was always a resounding no. Some of them pretended to be interested, like, oh, yeah, that'd be really cool to learn a functional programming language. And none of them were ever willing to learn Haskell. However, JavaScript is something completely different. Years ago, before I ever cracked open that Haskell textbook, I did the Khan Academy JavaScript course. It was super easy. It was super easy and awesome. That one focused on, like graphics and creating graphics using JavaScript. And, people argue, there are other JavaScript courses you could take or you should take, whatever. That one was easy because JavaScript is fun and easy, as evidenced by the fact it's the most popular programming language. And like ChatGPT pointed out, TypeScript is just a superset of JavaScript that you can incrementally adopt. So Charles has done the right thing here. I think deep down he knows the biggest thing, let's call it the biggest thing, that is the greatest triumph of Cardano is that it was built on Haskell, which was not easy. That is the hard route to go. Charles climbed the tallest peak there, used the hardest language to build. I'm sure you academics of functional programming languages would argue, no, the hardest one is this or whatever. But he used a really hard language to build Cardano. So to have this super secure foundation, we wouldn't be living in the robbery forest. The cost of all that is that developers don't want to learn it. So it's really hard to achieve developer adoption. Charles is fixing that. Deep down, he knows that was the big cost. He's fixing that cost by pushing Midnight out there. You hear him talking about how it's a fourth gen blockchain, but I think deep down he knows the real headline is that this is TypeScript, which is just a superset of the most popular programming language of them all, JavaScript. That's the real headline with Midnight. So my opinion is if this was just a side chain, a partner chain, or even if it was an L2, whatever, if it was any chain in the Cardano ecosystem that featured a more popular programming language, that would have been plenty. That would have been enough. But this is Charles. He doesn't ever do just enough. He always tries to do the maximum. He's a maximalist of doing things. He always goes to the extreme. It's like, we're going to make a blockchain. Let's use the most secure programming language that like NASA uses. So when he goes to build a partner chain for Cardano, he doesn't just give us a much more popular programming language. He also tries to make it a fourth gen chain, which means it has a bunch of privacy stuff, but it's also, meant to be regulatorily compliant. There are a lot of regulatory issues we can go into there. We're not going to talk about the regulatory issues tonight. There's going to be a lot of time for that. We'll have a lot of time to go into that. Maybe we'll talk about there's one thing we'll talk about probably at the end if there's time tonight. But here's the light. Here's the Nightpaper, which of course is just a play on words. This is a light paper, but because it's midnight, it's a night paper. And more importantly, it introduces the concept of the night token. So we've known about the dust token for a long time. What people didn't realize, and which was kind of a not well kept secret in Cardano, was that there were actually two tokens, the night token and the dust token. We found out about dust a long time ago, and people kept saying, when is the dust airdrop going to be? And some people in the ecosystem knew that was not going to be the token you want. It was going to be the night token that you want. We'll explain why as we go through this night paper. So they're going to lay out the benefits. They give you an executive summary, and they're going to lay out the benefits of Midnight. And the first thing, rightfully, thank you for hitting this first, because this is the most important issue for app developers. It's learnable. It's learnable. This is the most important thing. They led with the headline here. This is the most important thing. Midnight's TypeScript smart contract framework alleviates the need to learn and maintain. They should have just said Haskell. You don't need Haskell. That's the headline, but they said, alleviates the need to learn and maintain code that requires niche programming language skills. Haskell, as of H1 2024, TypeScript is the second most popular programming language. We just went through all that, however you want to rank them. TypeScript is extremely popular and learnable because it's just a superset of JavaScript, the most popular language. Versatile, composable, scalable. We'll talk about this a little bit later. The ZK architecture and it being Kachina based. You've heard Charles. If you watch Charles's AMAs, you've heard him talk about Kachina for a long, long time. He's always been highly impressed with Kachina, and here it is. a Kachina-based technology popping up in midnight. No surprise there. For app operators, protected, stable, and compliant. What does protected mean? Unlike other public blockchains, which expose every element, Midnight can protect data and metadata, enabling businesses to protect their customers without compromising sensitive data security or disclosing activity. This is the thing that Charles seems to be the most focused on when he markets Midnight. He's very focused on this protected slash unprotected hybrid nature of Midnight. And, I think rightfully so. I've already, explained what I think is the real headline here, but this is also a really important feature. If you've never, I've talked about this many times on the channel, and Charles has talked about this quite a bit, but if you've never heard an explanation, think about this protected nature of ZK based blockchains. Um, i- 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 Maybe the simplest way to think about it is this: when someone goes to a bar, they often need to prove how old they are to get into the bar. However, the bartender doesn't need to know your name and address. They just need to know how old you are. This is a problem if you are, say, an attractive woman going to the bar. You don't need the doorman, the bouncer, to know your home address. This is a really bad idea for him to know your name, your full name, and full address that's on your driver's license. So showing your driver's license is not the best way to establish your sufficient age to get in the bar. ZK technology, zero knowledge proofs, allow you to do exactly this in the digital realm, in the crypto realm. You can do exactly this with ZK technology. You can prove, say, that you're the right age without giving up your name and address on your driver's license. Or in the case of crypto, it might be something more like you can prove you own an asset without revealing what exact wallet address that asset is at. This is pretty valuable because it's hard to prove. If I want to prove that I own a certain amount of ADA or a certain amount of any other fungible token or a certain NFT, it's difficult to do even in Cardano today without showing people the actual address. And in that case, I have to reveal, because normal blockchains are very transparent, I have to reveal everything else. They can just get into a Cardano blockchain explorer and see every transaction I've ever done, because part of the magic, and again, the cost, just like the Haskell thing, there's magic and a cost. The cost is that everything is transparent. They can see every transaction I've ever done, and then they can go to all of those wallets that I've done transactions with and figure out what transactions they've done. That's the beauty and the cost of the transparency of a normal blockchain. This is part of what zero knowledge proofs are solving in a fourth gen blockchain like Midnight. So for ecosystem participants, this is all of us. This is all of us. So we've talked about developers and app developers, app operators. For ecosystem participants, we have network security. As a launch partner, Cardano stake pool operators help secure Midnight's block production. One thing you can say about Cardano, it's been very secure. And the SPOs from Cardano are going to help secure Midnight. This is a great thing because Cardano is nothing if not secure. Data security. Midnight's architecture stores private data locally on the user's machine. Think about that. It's not stored on the blockchain, it's stored locally on your machine. This decentralizes sensitive data across many nodes, making data breaches harder and less frequent than centralized data stores, such as databases. This has been the big problem, one of the big problems with the robbery force, the centralization of everything. How many bridges have become centralized points of failure? Decentralization is a great way to mitigate those risks. And I'm not saying there won't be bridges in midnight or anything like that, but I'm saying decentralization is great. You don't want to create these gigantic treasure troves that are going to attract all of the thieves. Interoperable, the Midnight roadmap includes support for modular app architecture, allowing developers to benefit from Midnight's data protection to create hybrid apps that continue to leverage their native chain's key capabilities and transaction settlement. So that one I think is the least compelling out of all of these. If you're on a chain other than Cardano, maybe interoperability is very compelling to you. But I think for me, that's the least compelling. They got some nice infographics here explaining how regular apps work, public chain dApps work, how the Midnight dApps work. So you can definitely get a good look at this. If you are more of a visual learner, this will tell you all about the unshielded data, the data shielded from the public and the company, how the company can collect no data, how the user can keep their private data, as we just learned, safe on their own machine, proofs, zero knowledge proofs to prove something, not the actual sensitive data that stays on the local machine. This is the beautiful shielded, unshielded duality of Midnight right there. Use cases. So like we already talked about, one of them is digital identity. This is like the driver's license kind of example we use. Midnight can enable secure and selective attestations of digital identity documents and credentials, such as a digital driver's license for age verification, education certificates for employment qualification. We already know about this from Cardano's long history with the Ethiopian Ministry of Education use case, or credit history for a loan. This one could become huge for the developed world without exposing irrelevant sensitive information, exact birthday, home address, income, etc. This makes digital IDs more usable and could elevate DEX's compliance via secure KYC capabilities. Now it's starting to come into focus, right? How this can create a compliant, how actually having this shielded data could help crypto become more compliant, because all of a sudden people might be willing to KYC themselves to DEXs if they just have to prove they're not in North Korea. If they just have to prove they're not in North Korea, people are probably okay to KYC unless they're a North Korean hacker team. Then it becomes problematic. But you remember how this works. We just looked at how this works. The private data can stay on the machine, and then via zero knowledge proofs, you can prove things. You can prove things to whoever you're dealing with on the chain without the private data leaving your machine. Just the zero knowledge proof does the proving for you, not the actual showing of the sensitive data. This is great. So we've got the digital identity use case. We've got asset tokenization. Midnight protection of data and metadata can help facilitate the tokenization of on-chain and off-chain assets like real-world assets. Asset ownership certification can live on-chain without compromising the owner's identity, the asset's details, or asset-related activity. So I think we'll learn more about this use case. I'm excited to learn more myself. I think real world assets, everybody knows this is a huge potential use case for crypto. But it's like, what if you need to prove that you own a parcel of land, in a certain province or state in your nation state? But you don't want to give the exact address. You want to prove you own a house in a certain city or in a certain neighborhood, but you don't want the whole blockchain to know your home address, because you don't want anybody showing up on your front door. This would be a great way to do that potentially. Balloting. Midnight can help create fraud resistant preference reporting systems, e.g., for example, surveying, polling, and voting for member-based organizations, which can improve eligibility and participation status. I think everybody realizes we're about to go through another cycle of voting problems. I think everybody's predicting rightly there will be voting problems in the upcoming US elections. Token utility. Okay, this is the part that is probably going to be the most interesting for a lot of people, and we've already touched on this. There are two tokens. There is the Dust token that we all already knew about. Dust, a capacity access shielded resource that operates the chain activity. This is the fuel. This is the fuel token. This is the gas token. Dust is the gas token. Night is the unshielded token for governance, consensus participation, and block production rewards. So these two tokens are very different, and there's some novel stuff with Dust that I think people weren't expecting until this paper came out. So Night, which is the governance token, has a fixed supply and deflationary policy. As an unshielded token, Night is easily accessible and helps ensure network security by operating as the reward token for its block producers. So the SPOs that produce blocks, and we'll talk later on, Minotaur will be involved. So you'll have multi consensus going on, so it won't just be SPOs eventually, but it sounds like at the beginning it'll be Cardano SPOs. They're going to get paid in the Night token, and the Night token is the kind of token we're familiar with, has a fixed supply, which we like if we're Austrian economics types. If we're around here, if you're lounging around your joint reading Hayek, and I mean joint in the domicile sense of the word, not the other sense. If you're lounging around your place reading Hayek and von Mises, then you're going to be very interested in the fixed supply and the deflationary policy. This is the kind of token we're used to if you're an ADA holder. Night will initially exist as a Cardano native asset. I think this assuaged a lot of the concerns. A lot of the people who were highly critical of the advent of Midnight were worried that it was going to sort of escape Cardano, that none of the benefits would accrue to us ADA holders, that this was IOG and Charles leaving Cardano, which I do not believe to be the case. So you can see Night will initially be a Cardano native asset. This is great news. I hope this makes a lot of people feel a lot more comfortable with Midnight. So it makes sense. They say right here, benefiting from Cardano's trusted infrastructure and ecosystem activity. Cardano has the strongest pound for pound ecosystem in all of crypto. I believe that strongly because it's true. Night will also offer extended functions such as network governance. Okay. Here's Dust. Dust is a capacity access shielded resource. So this is going to be the one that is private. This is going to be the private coin on the network, but it's just going to be the gas token used to facilitate transactions on the network, ensure that transaction metadata is protected to prevent correlation. So when you pay for your transactions with Dust, it's not going to be traceable back to you if you're proving, hey, I have a house in this neighborhood in this city. You don't want that necessarily connected to your address because you might have a huge amount of night tokens. Maybe you're a night well, but you have to prove something on the network. You don't want the gas token that you're paying for the transaction with to be linked back to your wallet, because then people will say, hey, somebody who has a house in this neighborhood is a night well. Let's go do the hammer exploit on him, on his let's hold his hands down and do the hammer exploit until he tells us his mnemonic phrase, right? His seed phrase. You don't want that. So this is where the Dust token comes in. But here's the interesting part. Dust, there are some novel things about Dust that you might not be used to. Dust behaves like energy in the physical world as it decays over time. So think about that. Dust decays. If you have a bunch of dust sitting in your wallet, it doesn't just stay there, it decays. So I assume that means it diminishes over time. It doesn't just sit there like your ADA does and doesn't move unless you click those buttons on your hardware wallet. Dust will actually decay inside your wallet. We're using that term wallet kind of loosely here because we all know that it's really just a public address on the blockchain, and the wallet is just an interface. Yeah, all that stuff you already know. However, so it decays. However, it is continually replenished as a pool of night generates energy to maintain a proportional supply. So why are they doing this? They're doing this for regulatory reasons. Dust cannot be transferred, thus addressing regulatory concerns that are commonplace with shielded tokens or assets. So it's not, the history of crypto is that privacy coins get you in trouble with regulators. Why? Because they can facilitate money laundering. And they don't want that because terrorists and narco terrorists, political terrorists and narco terrorists and human traffickers and drug traffickers, all the bad guys, they would love to use privacy coins. So of course the regulators don't like it. The anti-money laundering people don't like them. Dust is not that kind of coin that you could just, acquire huge amounts of or be paid in for illicit transactions. It's not transferable and it decays in your wallet and then it replenishes itself. So you're only going to have a certain amount of dust at any one time. It's not going to accumulate. It's going to decay and be replenished. So you're not going to like send it to someone and then they accumulate all the dust and then they're a dust well. It's not going to accumulate. It's going to decay and be replenished, and it's not going to be transferable. So this solves a lot of problems. Drug dealers won't be paying each other in the privacy coin in dust because it's going to decay and it won't be transferable. So this is a very clever way to get around the regulatory problems with shielded coins. And you already know shielded is a euphemism here so they don't get in trouble with the regulators because they know the regulators are laser focused on privacy coins. So they're not calling it a privacy coin, they're calling it a shielded resource. is a capacity access shielded resource. The intent of this design is to maintain the predictability of fees for those transacting on the network. And also, they don't say, also to get around the regulators. A future paper to be released after this paper will discuss the relationship between night dust and the Midnight network in more detail. I'll love to see the decay rate. It's kind of like, I think always think of it as sort of like the radioactive half-life of radioactive materials. But we'll see what the actual decay rate is here. We've encountered this before in the Cardano ecosystem, and I've been racking my brain to remember what project it was that had an asset with a decay rate like this. I think it was a Cardano project at some point along the way had an asset like this with a decay rate just like this, but I can't remember what project it was. Maybe it wasn't a Cardano project. I think it probably was, but maybe it was some other project in crypto. But I've seen this before. So we'll wait for that future paper to find out what the decay rate is, what the replenishment rate is, basically like how much dust you're going to have based on how much night you're going to have. So here we have more explanation of how the shielded unshielded duality of the whole network is going to work. An architecture section about the lightweight design, powerful, flexible, and interoperable. That all sounds good. Compact language. This sounds even better. Compact language sounds a lot better than what we've had previously in Cardano. Developers, block producers, and app operators. I like the focus on developers being first. I think we all know that's because they know the headline is that we're solving the developer adoption problem. Minimize developers' learning curve by adopting TypeScript programming language structure and APIs as the development framework. That sounds way better to developers, I'm sure. Here's the roadmap. We're going to have a DevNet, a testnet, a mainnet, and then beyond. So these look about like you'd expect. DevNet, private and public alpha, deploy example apps, shielded ledger, and token. Testnet, hard fork capability, unshielded token support. So over here, we'll get Dust. Over here, we'll get Night as part of the DevNet and testnet. Mainnet, token bridges, telemetry, multi-resource consensus. This is Minotaur. So Charles has talked about this quite a bit. If you don't remember what Minotaur is the idea that blockchains don't have to be just proof of stake or just proof of work or just proof of anything else. They could be a combination of those things. So you could have Bitcoin miners helping with consensus in a Minotaur-based blockchain, as well as Cardano stake pool operators. So you could have SPOs and miners and other types of block builders helping out with consensus. This is something Charles has talked about for a long time. We covered the Minotaur paper when it first came out on this channel. You can go back and check out all that coverage if you want to learn more about Minotaur. Custom spend logic, capacity lease exchange, customizable compliance. Customizable compliance is a big deal for legit business enterprises that want to do stuff on the chain, on the blockchain. This has been a big problem for legit businesses. They need to shield some data and allow some other data to be public and transparent on the blockchain. But they can't have everything be transparent. They don't want all of their transactions to be, all the data from all their transactions to be totally accessible to everyone in the world on a simple blockchain explorer. I know some of you are like, oh, I'm an idealist. I actually want everything to be transparent. I understand your laudable aspirations there, but the reality is that real legit business enterprises can't do that. They aren't going to do it. ZK recursion for contract state, ZK recursion for chain state, ZK trustless bridges. This is what we know so far about Midnight. This is the Midnight Nightpaper. It's all really interested. I actually think this is a fourth generation blockchain. This is a really big step forward in terms of the shielded, unshielded nature. I think a lot of people are down on it being a fourth generation blockchain right now because they feel like it's sort of like outmoding, the Cardano blockchain. I don't think that's the case. I think this is a great addition to the Cardano ecosystem. We've got a very secure root of trust in the Cardano L1. It's very, very secure. Developers don't want to build on it. I mean, a lot do. We have a lot of developers in Cardano, actually, but the perception is the developers don't want to build on the Cardano blockchain because of Haskell. Haskell's the whole thing. Here we're introducing this cool shielded, unshielded duality with all of the ZK-based technology. And you've got and the programming language is a superset of the most popular programming language. This is a fantastic step forward for crypto in general, I think, and especially for Cardano. And one of the best parts is that Charles, he is really good at timing. I mean, okay, he takes his time to build stuff. He takes a long time to build the things he's building, but he's really good about releasing them in the right part of the crypto cycle. He released this light paper a day before the Fed made a 50 basis point cut, which is why we're covering these two topics together in one video. It's also right before the fun year in crypto. If you follow the 4-year crypto cycle, and I know all of you do, you know next year is the fun year. This is the September before the fun year, before the big crypto summer events, when things go crazy, when we have all the fun. That 1 out of 4 years that's super fun in crypto, that's next year. It's September before that year, and it's actually on the eve of the first Fed rate cut in years, and it wasn't the 25 basis point cut that would have been sufficient for all of us. It was actually a 50 basis point cut. So once again, I have to applaud Charles for his excellent timing. We'll see how all this works out, but I think this is a really important innovation for Cardano, and I think it bodes well for all of our futures. I think the fears that Cardano was being left behind are unfounded. The important token here is the Night token, and it's a Cardano native asset. Now we're going to talk about one little thing with Midnight that I've been thinking about. Unfortunately, this is not a one more thing, like, oh, one more thing, like Elon style, where it's something really cool or some great new announcement that was unexpected. This is more like something I hope they're being really careful with. So I posted this yesterday, I think, or earlier today, something like that. So you see, it's a little astronaut, and he's looking at a clock that has struck midnight. I'm not sure if everybody understood what this was. Maybe it was a little too cryptic, no pun intended, but I'm not sure if people understood what this was. So my point was that this post right here, I was hoping that this was going to be a very important consideration for any projects planning an airdrop and this big visual cue toward midnight. Why did I not just type midnight? Because I didn't want to document in easily searchable text exactly what I was trying to say for our regulator friends. I didn't want them to have a little roadmap here. We don't want to argue against ourselves. But I think this post that came out today pretty readily illustrated the relationship between what I was saying here and what's in these screenshots we're going to look at one second and what's actually happening in midnight. So listen to Charles here at Token 2049 Singapore.
Then there's a question of incentives and distribution. Ordinarily, I've been in space so long, I kind of know all the dirty tricks. What you do is you go to a VC, they give you a bunch of money, they get founder tokens, and then they dump on retail and the network launches. You know who you are.
That's right, Charles. You get him. We don't want those VCs, but he has a clever solution. But that's where this little caveat thing comes in.
You do. And they make great money. And then the ecosystem collapses, and the next thing goes, the next thing goes, the next thing goes. That's not how we get ahead. So instead, here's what we do. Just do something called a glacier drop. So you take 135 million accounts across.
So important info there. Glacier drop. This is going to be a glacier drop. Tim Harrison echoes that up here. And he said 35 million wallets. 135 million wallets, glacier drop.
all the major cryptocurrencies. You just airdrop to them. And if people want it, they mine it in the process.
Okay, more very important info. He said you airdrop it to them, all the major 130, what was it, 138, 135 million wallets. I don't think it matters. 135-ish million wallets across the major cryptocurrencies. You airdrop it to them, and if they want it, they mine it. So they're going to do something. They're going to do something to get the actual Night tokens. So we're assuming these are the Night tokens we're talking about. But you notice they have to do something. He used the phrase mine it. They have to do something to get these tokens.
Process of mining it, they launch the network.
The benefit to the network is that they help to launch the network. So there's a benefit from this airdrop. It's not just like, hey, you get a bunch of free tokens, go for it, our gift to you, nothing in return. There's a benefit accruing to the network. And in a second here, we're going to substitute the word issuer for the word network.
So that's how you get a fair distribution, right? Everybody gets it.
So I think this is a really good point. If the goal was to create a fair distribution, I think they have definitely crafted this is a well-crafted plan to achieve a fair distribution. You can quibble about whether or not you want it to go to the other blockchain wallets, whether it should all go to Cardano or whether we're going to bring in a whole bunch of users by giving this also to the Bitcoin wallet holders, the Ethereum wallet holders, and expand that out however far you want to in whatever directions you want to achieve this 135 million number.
Everybody has it. And here's the other beautiful part about that. In the process of doing this, we invented a new protocol called Minotaur. We wrote it with Shireen, who went on to create EigenLayer with the technology.
Now he's going to talk about Minotaur and how you could be a Bitcoin miner doing proof of work, mining of blocks. You could also be a stake pool operator, doing proof of stake, validation of blocks. So we already discussed that part. But here's what I've been getting at. Sorry, there's a very long-winded way to get to this post right here. So look at this. So this is a post, and the important part is the actual screenshots. So the poster here makes the point, hey, the SEC has actually been very clear about what they think about airdrops. Their position is very clear. You may disagree with their position, but their position is actually pretty clear. And here's their position. So in this case, which is called Tomahawk Exploration, I believe, they say Tomahawk received value in exchange for the bounty distributions in the form of online marketing, including the promotion of their ICO on blogs and other online forums, where a gift disperses corporate ownership and thereby helps to create a public trading market. It is treated as a sale. Here, Tomahawk issued tokens as part of the bounty program to generate interest in the ICO, which benefited Tomahawk. Distributions of tokens that are securities in exchange for promotional services to advance the issuer's economic objectives or create a public market for the securities constitute sales for purposes of Section 5 of the Securities Act and 10B of the 34 Act. So they say the ICO and bounty program constituted an offer of securities under the Securities Act because it involved an attempt or offer to dispose of or solicitation of an offer to buy a security or interest in a security for value. So what they're saying is an airdrop can be this is according to Gensler's SEC. I'm not saying this is the way it should be. I'm saying this is the Gensler SEC's position. They're saying an airdrop can can create a security. This can be a securities distribution if the issuer is receiving something of value. The lack of monetary consideration for free shares does not mean there was not a sale or offer for sale for purposes of Section 5 of the Securities Act. Rather, a gift of a security is a sale within the meaning of the Securities Act when the donor receives some real benefit. So this is a problem. If you do an airdrop, and even if the goal is for it to be a fair distribution, if you do an airdrop and you as the issuer are getting a benefit from that airdrop, they're going to consider that to be the value part the value part of the determination of whether or not this was a securities transaction. So even though the recipient is not paying anything from the airdrop, if they're doing something that creates value for the issuer, the Gensler SEC is going to take the position that that was, in fact, a distribution of securities. So let me be very clear. I'm not saying this is going to be a problem for midnight. In fact, what I'm saying is exactly what I posted right here. I'm sure this will be a very important consideration. So, one thing we know about IOG and Charles is that they've always taken a very strategic and nuanced approach to regulatory matters. They've made some very wise decisions like self custodied staking. One of the most attractive things about the Cardano ecosystem has been that its architects have made some very good regulatory decisions. So I'm sure they either took this case into account when they made the decisions involved in the midnight airdrop, or they're taking it into account now. And you notice we don't have details on the airdrop now. So I'm sure they're taking this kind of thing, this case specifically, into account. I'm just saying this is a thing I hope and believe will be an important consideration. This is something that I think not a lot of projects that are thinking about airdrops are actually thinking about. But I'm sure in the case of Midnight, because I know they've made such good decisions in the past, I'm sure this is something they're thinking about. In any case, I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.